Welcome, everyone. I am your host, Conor Bronsdon, here with my fellow co-host, Atindriyo Sanyal, CTO and co-founder at Galileo. Atin, great to see you. Great to have you back on the mic with me.
Always great to be here, Connor.
Yeah, we've got an exciting conversation planned here. We're joined by IBM's Dr. Maryam Ashoori, head of product for Watsonx.ai. Maryam, welcome to the show. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
We're really excited about it because you've got over 15 years of experience in developing data-driven technologies, and now you're responsible for leading Watsonx.ai, IBM's AI development studio. Our listeners may know you as an expert in enterprise AI with 2 master's degrees in artificial intelligence and a PhD in system design engineering from the University of Waterloo, where are also an adjunct professor, which is fantastic. I have to admit, I've always wanted to teach a university class, so it's really cool. So it's such a pleasure to have you on the show. Let's jump right into your work at IBM. Can you provide an overview of IBM's AI strategy and how Watsonx is fitting into that vision or driving it?
Everything that we do is a reflection of the market. And it's been exciting to just watch how the market has been evolving over the past, I would say, 24 months at this point. Just looking past, I feel like in 2023 or even early 2024, most of the market was exploring and investigating with generative AI. They were looking for a wow factor, an aha moment, but at this point, the majority of the enterprise market have moved past that aha moment. They have moved toward production and scale. And that's been the area that we've been focused on, since day one designing. What are the requirements for enterprise for production and scale when it comes to generative AI or AI in general? And it's been interesting to just see how consistent the market has been in terms of the challenges. The top 3 challenges that I've been seeing, and basically that was the guiding principles for the design of our platform, has been centering around, 1, ensuring a responsible implementation of AI. The second one is cost performance optimization. You're talking about the scale of enterprise. The very large general purpose models with large compute is not necessarily delivering what you need. So optimization, exactly the cost. And last area to focus on, which is accelerated with agents over the past year, is how can we increase and capitalize on the ROI of generative AI, bringing this generative AI potential to every single of our enterprise, which is really taking advantage of automation to bring that level of productivity to every single corner. So these 3 areas, optimization, ensuring a responsible implementation of the technology, and bringing automation to every single corner of enterprise, has been the driving force for what we are designing as part of the platform for Watsonx.
Atin, I know a lot of these ideas resonate with you. Do you want to chime in here?
I think there's a lot of similarity between the kind of market that IBM's going after, big enterprise, and us, even though we're a much more smaller company. I think my experience from what Maryam just described with our customers is very similar. We spent a lot of time in 2022, 2023, really just it was in simmer mode, like AI was in simmer mode. And last few months has really seen a Cambrian explosion of agentic applications and the maturity of some of these orchestration frameworks. So very similar observations on my side as well. But one follow-up question for you, Maryam, given what you've seen in big enterprise, how does IBM kind of think about build versus buy when it comes to open source models as well as bigger models like OpenAI, Anthropic? Does IBM look at it as leveraging these models in their platform, or do you focus more on building foundational models from scratch?
Yeah, so let's talk about, for example, cost performance challenge that we just brought up as one of the challenges. Cost performance optimization. If you want to deliver an optimized solution, what are you going to need? You're going to need LLM or a collection of LLMs, and you're going to need a bunch of model customization tooling that is allowing you to take advantage of your proprietary data about your users, your domain-specific data, to build something that is differentiated from the market, but is also delivering the performance that you want for your target use case for a fraction of the cost, right? So that's basically the problem that we are trying to solve. So in this story, in order to deliver on this challenge, what you're going to need is to have access to a series of state-of-the-art models, right? Different sizes, different architectures, different license terms. We have global customers. Maybe there are some license restrictions in one part of the board versus others. There is GPU restrictions in some part of the board. It's like, what are the requirements for running these models, right? So you want to have access to all of those. And it's the same for the toolings, for model customization. There is a range of those approaches. You might just need prompt engineering and RAG, or in some cases, they need full fine-tuning and parameter-efficient fine-tuning, or even alignment tuning, right? So the needs are different. We want to make sure that there is optionality and there are choices for your customers. And in terms of choices and flexibility, we've been also looking into where are these options coming from, right? So for example, for models, we've been leveraging the state-of-the-art open source models. Like the first day that state-of-the-art models goes out, we are out on the same day. So it's like our users should have access to that. But also some of them are commercial models. Like, for example, we established partnership with Meta and Mistral over the last year. So Mistral Large is an example of a commercial models that we have available in our platform. Or a customer may come in and they said, hey, I have a custom model that I made myself on my on-premises or on another platform, and I want to bring it in, import it. So it's not in your catalog. So we also expanded to import your own custom models. So basically delivering a range of options, because we strongly and firmly believe that one single model is not the solution for a range of those. It's a mix and match. So that's the model part. The same for tooling part. We want to make sure that we are integrated with ecosystems. So for example, you mentioned agents. Where are the developers these days? They are experimenting, they are exploring. Some are exploring with Crew AI, some are exploring with Llama Index, some are exploring with LangGraph. We are blending all together integration to make sure that that optionality is available for experimentation, but also we care about production and scale, security, privacy, deployment, like availability of the service, robustness, all of those in production, not just experimentation.
Maryam, I'd love to understand more about how Watsonx as a platform is differentiating from other AI platforms in the market. You've talked a bit here about enabling open source, trying to make sure that you access other ecosystems. What are the other ways that Watsonx is different?
Very good question. So back to optionality and choices that we talked about, we want to make sure that our customers are not locked in, and that's one of the foundations that we've been focusing on, being hybrid. So in our platform today, you can take the whole platform and deploy it on basically the platform of your choice, either on premises or the cloud of your choice, right? Versus being locked into one single model provider. So hybrid is one of them. The second one that we are really serious about is trust, ensuring a responsible implementation of AI. You saw that with tooling and models. For models, we started training our own models from scratch. That's our Granite collection, because we wanted to be comfortable standing behind those models and provide indemnification for our customers, right? And we've been very transparent in terms of how the models are trained. And that's on the model side of the house. The same story for tooling. We've been heavily investing on our governance and observability platform, Watsonx.governance. Every step of the way, who touched the model to do what, we automatically document the lineage of what happened. But also we are building guardrails in place, guardrails on input, guardrails on output, guardrails orchestrators, right? Basically monitoring everything. So I would say that trust is very close to our heart and very critical for us, especially because we have a lot of customers coming from highly regulated environments like finance, insurance, healthcare, you can imagine. It's a serious thing for them. So trust is the second angle. The third angle is we recognize the complexity of the stack. I think the market is underestimating how complicated the modern AI stack is. and what developers need to master and harvest in order to deliver on those potentials that generative AI is promising, right? So from our perspective, we've been looking into simplifying the stack as much as we can, integrating behind the scene, integration between different components of the platform, but also integration with the ecosystem. For example, we mentioned Crew AI, we mentioned LangGraph. We are behind the scene integrated. So a developer comes in, they don't need to be worried about maintaining the code or coming from third party or learning that. It's one single SDK, they get the job done, right? So simplicity is the next factor that I would mention. And that last but not least is automating, providing guidance as much as we can. We acknowledge that, for example, in this world, there are lots of developers getting into AI application development when the depth of AI knowledge and skills may not be there. Like, for example, we asked 1,000 developers, we ran a survey, they were built in the US, they were building AI applications. We said, how comfortable you are with your Gen AI? And surprisingly, the AI app developers that we talked to, only 24% associated themselves with knowledgeable and skilled on Gen AI. So there is a big gap in AI skill development and development, right? So we've been trying because of that. And this, why is it important? When you think about cost performance optimizations or any sort of optimizations, you need to have a knowledge of AI. Like what parameter is that? Hyperparameter optimization is one angle. Like what is the right model to use? What is the right technique for model customization tool to use? So we've been heavily also investing on automating those pipelines. So for example, for RAG, it's like, how can I automate multiple RAG pipelines with different parameters and show developers the performance of which one yields a better one just to pick that, right? And that's the fourth area that we've been heavily investing on.
And I see you nodding along to a lot of that.
Yeah, I think I do agree on a lot of things that Maryam mentioned, especially around simplicity, sort of meeting the developer where they are already in familiarity, and scale is certainly a very big sort of challenge, which is, I would say, unsolved in the agentic workflows because we're in the prototypical phase of agents and it's all very exciting. But one additional observation I have made is when it comes to agents, the interesting pattern of development, what I've seen, and this comes from my own experience having worked on the first version of Siri over a decade ago, a lot of the software engineering paradigms are coming back into play. And this includes frameworks like LangGraph, LangChain, who are essentially incorporating software paradigms and design patterns that have been known to work for traditional software systems. They've kind of been augmented and sprinkled with LLMs, and there's fewer paradigms which need to be learned, like how do you do rethinking or how do you incorporate any agentic specific things. I almost see this as a sort of an amalgamation of what we've already learned around scaling traditional software, sort of meeting the new world of Gen AI and the Gen AI components that they bring. And I'm very optimistic and excited about the next 12 to 15 months when all this will truly come together. And the real challenge will be some of the more fundamental things which Maryam mentioned, like trust and accuracy of, especially from an evaluation perspective. I can talk about it from a lens of evaluation and observability. We've always had problems of observability in traditional software systems to root cause something, like how do you do it in an effective way? The same challenges are here, except that there's a few more newer paradigms that you're dealing with LLMs in the mix. So I would say that a lot of things are coming together, and the challenge for effective, building high quality and effective agents is really high quality observability, high quality evaluations. And that's something that is very bread and butter to Galileo, and we focus a lot on that day in and day out.
That seems like it aligns with your perspective on agents as well, Maryam, and enabling developers to really go and explore this technology.
No, he's right on. Just it's interesting to just back to the beginning that I started to talk about market, how the market has been evolving. It's interesting to see last year they were experimenting with LLMs. They moved to production. Now we are going through the same thing with agents. The market is exploring. They are looking for wow factor, but when they go to production and scale, they cannot go to production without observability and governance. Like it's essential. Like you gotta have transparency and traceability of actions and monitor that for agents. It's like, well, action was taken under what circumstances, and can I control that, right? And also over time, not just one time. So you're going to need to see that tracing of information at build time and run time, and after that, over time, right? So these are the areas that, like, I don't think enterprise has been heavily looking into, but once they are past that excitement about agents, these are one of the essential elements that they need to seriously follow up on.
Absolutely. And I'd also want to add to what Maryam had said earlier about versioning and lineage. I think that's a topic which is not talked about enough, I feel. I'm drawing parallels to the age of MLOps when feature stores were created and evangelized. And as part of that, model monitoring solutions also came. Lineage and versioning and management, the data management side of AI, is extremely critical. And it will be all the more critical as agentic systems start to, slowly scale, because in the end, data is the fuel at the end of the day that powers any system. And that is something that's never changed in machine learning. And that will still be the same for agentic applications. So having that layer of data management, lineage, and combining that with observability to be able to actually root cause when something goes wrong, and to be able to track lineage of a lot of problems in AI essentially boil down to the data. And it's the same story here with Gen AI and even with agents. So that layer of data management is very critical.
I had an insurance company coming to me and say that, Maryam, it doesn't matter what the model customization approach is. If you don't have lineage and governance, I just can't use this, because I need to know exactly what version of what model was trained on what version of data. And now with synthetic data generation everywhere, like, we need to know what was synthetic data, what was real, retain that data, and be able to audit it back and trace it back. That was an example of highly regulated industries. They just can't go to production without that knowledge.
So I'd love to know more about what's made for successful implementations in these highly regulated industries. Obviously, IBM is an expert here. This is something that for decades now IBM has done successfully. How are you making sure that you translate that success to this new Gen AI agentic era?
At the foundations of all of those, we really have the models and we have the tooling stack, right? Let's go back to that. On the model side, there is a deep need on a model that they can trace back, be transparent in some terms of the training data that went into that, right? And just a portion of the models out there, you can actually get access to that information. So from our perspective, at least with our Granite, we wanted to make sure that, one, we establish a trustworthy governance process around the training of the model, that we can document the lineage of what happens and filter out the data, like, for example, toxic information, copyrighted information, and all of those, to best of our knowledge, and keep updating that, but also be transparent with the market about how they are trained and provide client indemnification. So basically, we are like, okay, so this is our strategy to cover you on the model side, right? On the tooling side, it's hand in hand. It's like you grab the pre-trained models, but then through the input and instructions, you can nudge the model to potentially create an undesirable output, right? Independent from what the model was. So it's essential for you to automatically document the lineage of that and stop that. So for agents, it amplifies. Why? Because for LLMs of last year, the absolute worst thing that could happen was LLM creating some content that was inappropriate. Agents can take actions. Actions have consequences. What if the agent decides to take an action to connect to a sensitive structured database and delete some of the customer sensitive information, or grab them and combine them with other workloads? Then we are talking about amplified impacts of this. And that's why it's essential to not only document that lineage and track that, but also stop that. Like, proactively detect those actions that are not appropriate, detect them, or make sure that human is in the loop and no actions is taken automatically when the stake is high. These are the areas that we've been looking into, and we've been trying to surface and educate the market about. These are the consequences. The stack might not be mature, but it will get there. This is a stack that is evolving in the market rapidly around the agents. And I think that's the part that the technology providers and the technology consumers hand in hand are trying to figure out what is that uncharted territory, what are the gaps, and let's resolve them.
This might be a dumb question for you, Maryam, but I'm curious to know from IBM's perspective, a lot of the things that you've talked about are sort of platform challenges and tooling challenges to enable developers. And Galileo, for example, is essentially an evaluation observability platform. So a lot of the problems you're talking about, we think about it day in, day out. But IBM is also a very big company, and it has the ability to also enable developers to build great Gen AI products, which is kind of the layer above the platform. So I'm curious to know from your perspective, is IBM's strategy to just provide the tools to build any kind of application for developers, or also provide products, Gen AI products, to your users?
Yeah, very good question. At the end of the day, the goal is to solve customer problems. So for every single one, we sit together with them to identify what is the gap. Sometimes the gap is to use a product and out of the box use it. Sometimes the gap is you need a custom build approach, build it. And not every single customer has the talent to actually make that custom. The majority, I see nothing, the majority of the customers at this point, they are interested in out-of-the-box solutions that solves that. So as IBM also, we looked into our own platform. We said, hey, we have a platform that is providing Gen AI technologies, but we have a series of softwares that can benefit from that technology. So we have a category of softwares and products that are enriched with just generative AI technologies. One example is, for example, Environmental Intelligence Suite. It's a product that you can use for your disaster management. Behind the scene, you can use foundation models. We have geospatial models. We build with NASA to use them for the purpose of disaster management, right? Out of the box, you can use that. You don't really need to know what are the foundation models or what are the tools. There is a second category of softwares that are powered up by Gen AI. These are the new sets of products that now we can bring to the market. One example of that is Watsonx Code Assistant. So now, behind the scene, there's a Granite code powering up the whole product that the developer can use for the purpose of productivity. So within IBM, we are actually thinking about 4 different areas. One is the platform providing these technologies to the market. The second one is the products that can enrich the experience and benefit from generative AI. The third one is the new products that are powered up by Gen AI. And the fourth area is the services that we offer to sit together with the customer and figure out, hey, is one of these helping you, or there is something else that we can pull in a custom solution to solve your problems.
Thanks for explaining that. That makes a lot of sense.
I'm curious to dig into the agentic side more. So you brought up that there's this scaling challenge happening with agents where getting to production, particularly in these highly regulated industries, can be challenging. And some of the ways that we've been tracking on this and trying to understand the impact of agents align very closely, I think, with your perspective, where it's like, okay, did the LLM planner for this agent select the right tool and start on that right path? Did those tools work? Are they having errors? Are they actually advancing towards the ultimate goal with, does the trace reflect this action advancement? And then, of course, completion around, does the final action align with the agent's original instructions? And you brought up this challenge around that final completion metric of saying, like, look, we have to be really careful, particularly in these highly regulated industries, to go, we actually need to achieve this goal. We can't risk this action completion being incorrect. We have to ensure that these agents are doing not just the right job, but they're doing it well. How are you approaching that with your customers?
Yeah, there are 4 areas that we are looking into. The first one is the LLM itself. Agent is powered up by LLMs. So all the concerns that we have with LLMs in terms of hallucination, lack of explainability, transparency, all of those are applicable here. Even the guardrails in terms of filtering happen, jailbreak, and they are all applicable to agents here. So that is coming to the picture. The second category is what I call agent guardrails. So these are the guardrails that are specific to agents that you want to develop. Like, for example, faithfulness, the action that was taken. But there are a series of metrics that are stemmed from the specific action calling and reasoning, right? Those guardrails. So that's the second category that we want to make sure that we have a solid story around. The third one is something that I call agent evaluation. So this agent evaluation is a superset of LLM evals that we had in the past, plus all the consequences for tool calling that is coming to the picture. Accuracy, performance, now you're talking about external APIs, the data that you're getting back from that API, how are you going to evaluate the quality of the response that you got back, right? Are you going to have some sort of content filtering on those? Like, how are you going to deal with those? So that's the third area that I'm looking into, agent eval. And last but not least is one area that Etin mentioned, observability and governance. Throughout the whole life cycle, build time all the way to runtime and after that overtime, right? Like checking what's going on for the agents. These four areas are the areas that we need to deeply look into and see if it's a requirement for the customer. If it's the requirement, what level of maturity they need to have in order to go to production, and what is this custom subset of the metrics that they need to track. If it's not provided by the existing one, how can we expand it or build share metrics in the market around those to address those?
Yeah, agentic evaluations is definitely an area where we're spending time researching and improving our products as well. Atin, I'm curious if you want to speak to your perspective on it, because I think there's a ton of ground to cover here. As Maryam and you have both highlighted, there are misconceptions about agentic AI where folks just think, oh, this is going to solve my problem. And they don't think about the entire structure that has to go around this to consistently solve the right problem in the right way. May from Writer said to us a couple months ago, this is not magic. We have to actually put guardrails in place. We have to build the right systems. So Atin, what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, my perspective is slightly orthogonal potentially to what Maryam was saying, although I do agree with what she was saying, double clicking into essentially what an effective end-to-end agentic evaluation system comprises of. I kind of flip the words. People talk about agentic evals. I see them as we need to build evaluation agents, because every piece of evaluation can be essentially needs to be agentic by nature, because they need to adapt to the different variables in your system once you productionize it, data being a key variable because data is always changing. And there's no one size fits all metric or any kind of statistical measure that will give you a good sense of whether the entire agentic system or parts of it are doing well or not. What needs to happen is you need to curb the false positives very quickly and give the instructions to the agent, which is the evaluation agent, to not make those same mistakes, and so that the agent itself evolves with your product. So that's kind of my view, in that you need to solve the problem end to end. One is you need to break it down into different components, because each component needs to be evaluated in a different way. There's different measures for the health of your RAG system, which includes retrieval quality, ranking quality. And then there's the output, which can be measured by a different set of metrics. But each of those metrics can't be one and done. They need to be adapted through human feedback, which is where there's a massive human feedback component. But the challenge for a platform play here becomes, how do you take that human feedback in a minimal and least intrusive manner and incorporate it into your ecosystem so that the agent doesn't make that same mistake ever again? So it's a lot of these things that need to come together to build a cohesive platform. And we at Galileo kind of see them as self-evolving evaluation agents, which is kind of like a multi-layered system at the bottom of which are the fundamental metrics, the statistical measures that give you some sense of kind of the leading indicators of good or bad. But at top of that, there's this automation layer that you have to build, which is which can be seen as agentic in itself, which adapts to the data and the different any variable to the system, whether it's the usage patterns which are evolving over time or the data that's changing over time, and how do you make those evaluation paradigms adapt to that?
And I'm glad you brought it up, Atin. I think it's two ways, both of them, not this or that. So, for example, agent evaluation, one area that we are looking into is LLM as a judge to go and look into, let's say, if it's a chain of thought, break it down to different pieces, multiple nodes. In every node, evaluate, like automatically evaluate if that was a right action taken. And if it wasn't, automatically regenerate the prompt template that can cover that and fix it. So LLM behind the scene is part of the process in this case to do the agent evaluation. So I think it's a two-way, using agents for evaluations, but also agent eval itself.
No, absolutely. I totally agree. And the other side of the coin is the scale and cost, which we talked about initially. And the same challenges apply to evaluation as well. To your point about using LLM as judge and chain of thought, they do give you great results. But behind the scenes, chain of thought is a very expensive process, which has, not to get too technical, but multiple forward passes across the deep learning model. And those costs add up because they're running on very expensive hardware. So one of our challenges that we've been going down the journey of is how do you build effective but cheaper evaluations, which need not necessarily use the most complex paradigms all the time. Like chain of thought is great, but one of our discoveries has been in many circumstances, from an eval's perspective, chain of thought might not be needed, and you can get high accuracy evals without chain of thought, and we've published about it as well. That's the other side of the coin, which is how do you surface high accurate evaluations at cheaper price?
Exactly. Looking at what is the use case, what is the best way to tackle that. Funny enough, last week we released the new Granite 3.2, Granite Reasoning. For that one, you can toggle thinking on and off. So if you don't need that chain of thought reasoning, because it's very expensive, right? You turn it off. And for the use cases that you need to actually do that, you can turn it on. But I'm with you, like it's a combination of models and evals, and at the end of the day, cost performance optimization.
Love it. This has been a fantastic part of the discussion. I'd love to keep diving into agentic AI more broadly, as it's obviously kind of the theme of 2025 thus far in AI. What are the misconceptions, Maryam, that you see different businesses having about how we should be approaching agentic AI?
Let me tell you a fun fact. Those 2 master's degrees that you mentioned, it was actually a multi-agent systems 20 years ago. So I did agents and multi-agent systems before deep learning. So when you talk to me and I'm looking into the definition of agents that has reasoning capabilities, I'm in those category of people that don't believe LLMs of today can do reasoning, because they're not, like, in my mindset, that's very different than the culture of agents that I grew up with, right? And I think this is also a misconception in the market. Like what's commonly known as agents in the market is basically LLM with function calling and tool calling, which is, don't get me wrong, it's great opportunity to bring Gen AI to every single corner of enterprise, because now you can connect them together, right? But the promise of agents is really that autonomous reasoning and planning, making decisions and taking actions. I don't think we are there yet. We have some sort of preliminary planning in place, but I think that's the opportunity that over the next 6 to 9 months, I'm personally super excited about. I feel like once we get comfortable with our technology stack collectively in the market to a point that these models can actually make sound decisions, then that's the point that it unlocks a lot of use cases for all of us. And I think that's a misconception in the market, that it does it today, but it's not really capable to do that today.
I have a follow-up question, Maryam, for you. This might be a little more general, but in the evolving tool stack that you see today, and the clear increase in capabilities of what we can do with LLMs. What is that number one thing that you find maybe a gap in the tooling ecosystem or the platform or anything that can enable developers to build effective, high quality agents? If there's a gap at all that you see, and what is that top of mind?
Yeah, I would say that there are three areas that it's both gap and opportunity, right? It's active areas that they care about. One, back to our optimization, flexibility, and choices. When you talk to developers, I talk to my developers. I surveyed and I said, how many tools are you using in average on a daily basis to create an AI applications? More than half of them, they said 5 to 15 tools. 5 to 15 tools in a market that is evolving rapidly. New tools are coming up in the market fast. I said, how much time are you willing to dedicate to learn a new tool to figure out if it's the right tool to integrate your stack or not? They said not more than 2 hours. So they are craving for easy to master and learn new technologies, less than 2 hours, bring it in, integrate. This is a major need for simplicity, need for abstraction, need for integration behind the scene to address the optionality that they need. And I think that's the area that we should all work on collectively. The second area is innovation, the crave for innovation. That word that like researchers develop something and then next year they publish a paper and then next year product picks up, it's all gone, right? Now we are talking about research. What do you have today? What were you working on last night? Can I bring it into products? The speed of innovation, and that's the expectations from developers. Even though if they don't have the AI background, they expect us to have the state-of-the-art technology as it becomes available to the market for them in a way that they can consume. And that's a major gap. Like it's not an easy thing because they need to go all over the stack. It's not just application layer. They need to go to model layer, GPU level, runtime level, optimize everything. And I think our role is to simplify that and tackle those three areas, simplification, simplicity, innovation, and optionality and choices.
I couldn't agree more. I think I've had the same observation where I think we've kind of reached the point where, the excitement for a new model that comes out has starting to kind of saturate and dwindle over time, right? Like it's like, hey, there's a new model. Great, it probably does the same thing. And there's like step function improvements in some academic benchmarks, which the citizen developer or someone who just wants to build something awesome wouldn't really care about. And on the other side, there's tool fatigue and this proliferation of, hey, here's another tool that can help you build something. But if that tool's not simple, to Maryam's point, as a developer, I'm trying to, keep pace with the innovation and really trying to build something awesome and give me tools that can help me on the way and not serve as impediments. So I see that as challenge as well.
Yeah, this pacing challenge also speaks to something that Maryam brought up earlier in the conversation, talking about this survey of 1,000 developers you did, where, 23-ish% said, yeah, I feel proficient right now. The pace of this industry and of the tooling around the industry, everything you need to learn, it's moving so rapidly. There's always a new model coming out. There's always a new tool that's got some new innovation. And it's making it really hard for folks to feel fully comfortable. I can see a world where this just continues to accelerate and it becomes harder and harder to keep pace. So I'm curious how you both think developers and their technical leaders should be thinking about this challenge.
My suggestion is always to know your problem. What is the problem that you're trying to solve and establish a point of view from the market, because then they are able to differentiate what is noise and what is the thing that is worth their time to spend on. They have to be very careful about their time. They have limited time to spend on different pieces of technology, and the best thing that they can do is understand their problem and have established a point of view to be able to evaluate what is noise, what is worth the time.
I was in a hackathon recently where I saw a demo of essentially taking a research paper, like the Transformers paper, for example, which was the demo. You upload it and you create a podcast out of the paper. And it blew my mind because like just turning the time back to when I used to do hackathons very, very often. This kind of stuff was unthinkable to be built in 10 hours. So the technology and the ingredients are there for us to build something amazing. The only impediments are really, the cost, the platform, and just the simplicity of tooling that can enable me to accelerate and build something very real, as opposed to, just being impediments. And the noise is really one of the big challenges.
My last advice is take advantage of that. I was asking the developers how much AI assisted coding are you using? And basically, a good portion of them, I don't remember the numbers now, maybe it was 49%. It was a sizable size. They said very often they use it. And in average, they said they are saving 1 to 2 hours per day out of that coding. And 4% of the developers that I talked to, they said they are saving more than 4 hours a day. Like if they really know how to use AI for that purpose. And I'm like, this is massive. Like, get on that. Take advantage of AI for the sake of productivity of yourself.
Maryam, this has been a really fantastic conversation. Honestly, I'm looking at our talk track here. We kind of built in advance, and I feel like we only got through half our questions because you and Atin are diving into like so many interesting threads here and having these great back and forths. So I'm like, well, I can't move us forward. They're having too great of a conversation here. But I want to close out with a couple of highlights that we didn't have a chance to chat about. So one, do you have a good example of a success story you can share with the Watsonx platform? Because you've talked about some really interesting examples here. Some challenges with regulated industries, but I also know there's some big successes that have happened. So I'd love to know and maybe inspire our audience with what does success look like?
The point that I like to call out is, and that's a misconception that Gen AI is applicable to every single enterprise use case. Is not. Like, we need to understand like what Gen AI is capable of addressing and what are sort of the use cases that it unlocks. And then when you look across enterprises, there are thousands of those examples that can come up. So for example, for generative AI, if you look into content-grounded question and answering as the number one use case for generative AI, classification, information extraction, code generation that we were just talking about, summarization, right? It's some of the applications. But perhaps the top one that I like to highlight is content-grounded question and answering, and most specifically in customer care. Because now we can basically equip whoever that has been providing historically the answers to our customers with knowledge that is generated from a body of information that can be quickly verified. And that was the story of last year. That was RAG. Now with agents, we can say, hey, LLM, if you don't find the answer in that body of information, you don't need to say, I don't know. Go to fire up a web search API and see what you can find and come back. And we always have human in the loop to verify that. So it's just amazing to think about the potential consequences to every single industry. This very simple example of agentic RAG or whatever you want to call it, right? And because of that, I think I'm super excited. It's not just one example use case for one specific industry. It's impacting every single one of us as consumer, as enterprise businesses. That's the beauty of Gen AI. We just have to figure out how to really deliver on the potential of what they have promised to deliver with our stack and our capabilities, empowering of developers to build those.
Absolutely. And I think that's why conversations like this one are so important. So Atin, Maryam, thank you so much for joining me today. Maryam, where can folks learn more about your work or the work you're doing at IBM?
Watsonx.ai, that's my product.
Perfect. That is an easy one to remember. And we will, of course, link it along with everything else we discussed today in the show notes. Go check out the research we've talked about. If you've got that survey you mentioned that you sent out to developers and some of that's public, we'd love to share that as well.
Wonderful.
And if you're listening and you are checking out the show notes, maybe just go ahead and leave us a review, hit that subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening. It really helps us bring more guests like Maryam on the show. If you're developing an AI product or leading a team, you can reach out to me or to Atin directly at Conor Bronsdon at Atindriyo Sanyal. You can find us both on LinkedIn. We love having these conversations, so reach out if you'd like to be on the show or have a guest to suggest. Maryam, just thank you so much. This has been so fantastic. It was a ton of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.